Welcome. Want to talk a little bit about this whole Alec Baldwin thing that's been going on. He just did an interview just last night with George Stephanopoulos and talked about he never pulled the trigger, never had his finger on the trigger. He never pulled the trigger. He would have never aimed a gun at somebody and had his finger on the trigger and pulled the trigger, and therefore he's not responsible and he didn't shoot anybody. That's kind of interesting. So I've got two different types of revolvers sitting in front of me. They are both cleared. This cylinder is empty. This cylinder is empty. And I wanted to show you the two types of revolvers and why you don't have to pull the trigger in order to fire a revolver. Now, again, there's two types of revolvers, right? A single action revolver, which is what this is, okay? This is a single action revolver. My finger is not on the trigger, okay? If you cock this back, the first setting locks the hammer, okay? Locks the hammer. That hammer will not go forward. This is a hammer, this is a trigger, okay? Cylinder. This hammer will not go forward unless I depress this trigger. I have to physically pull this trigger in order to move that hammer forward. If I come back again, it locks in the second position. And if I come back, or the secondary position, which is the firing position, in order for me, I could pull this back and let it go all day long and it will not close. But if I depress the trigger, pull the trigger, I can then release the hammer again. So this, I'm pretty sure, is not the type of weapon they were using, a single action revolver, okay? Now, having said that, they were probably using a double action revolver, which is what this is. Double action simply means this. You can either cock it back and pull the trigger to release the hammer, right? To force this hammer forward. Or I could simply pull the trigger and release the hammer. Pull the hammer back, right? The hammer comes back and then it goes forward. That's a double action revolver. I believe Alec Baldwin was thinking that in order to fire this, you have to pull the trigger in order to let that hammer go all the way back and then fall onto the bullet, hitting that bullet and discharging that round. Well, on a double action revolver, there's actually a spot between here and here where it's set back, where it's locked back, that I can actually pull this hammer back, release it, and it will still strike the round that's in this cylinder. So I don't have to pull this trigger to fire this weapon. I could simply go back with a hammer, right, before it locks. Now I locked it. But I could pull this hammer back, release it, and this weapon will fire. It'll still shoot. Back in the day, in the Westerns, they used to do what's called fanning the weapon, right? Fanning the weapon. And fanning the weapon, I'll do it with a single action. But what they would do is simply pull the trigger back. They take their hand and they would simply ride this hammer back, right? This is fanning the weapon. And I could shoot this thing by simply keeping my finger back on the trigger and then just hitting this hammer back and letting it fall forward and fire multiple rounds. Basically turning this into a semi-automatic. So the thought, I guess, that Mr. Baldwin had, and I really believe that this was all staged. I really believe that the entire interview was staged to try to set the stage for his innocence, to say, well, if he didn't pull the trigger, then obviously it was the gun that killed the lady, not me. I'm not liable. culpable, right? Well, that just goes to his own stupidity, because if you're using a weapon and you're not familiar with it, and you have not familiarized yourself with how that weapon works, that's problematic. And I remember years ago, my dad's buddy was a law enforcement officer, said, you know, ignorance of the law is not an excuse for breaking the law, right? Well, ignorance of a firearm is not an excuse for discharging that firearm, killing someone. That doesn't excuse you from guilt. Again, doesn't matter if your finger's on the trigger, okay? My finger could be on the side of this weapon, off the trigger. I'll pull this hammer back and let it go, and I can still discharge this weapon. So, go back to my video. Be a safe, responsible gun owner. Learn everything that you can about the weapons that you have. Take classes if you need to. You know, guys, these are not toys. And even if you're on a movie set, they're using real guns, real weapons on a movie set, and they're just using blanks, right? Dummy rounds, blanks, right? That don't really shoot anything. It's just a cartridge that has gunpowder in it, folded over on the ends. Doesn't mean that it's not dangerous. You know, you can still hurt somebody with a blank. I mean, there's still going to be gunpowder residue and flames shooting out of the front of this. So if you're pretty close to somebody, you could still cause injury and harm. So that's it in a nutshell. I think, and again, I go back to, I think they're trying to establish the fact that, well, in order for you to actually be guilty of shooting someone, you have to actually physically be pulling the trigger in order for that gun to go off. There's a lot of safety built into new firearms. There's a lot of, you know, the Glock has a safety on the trigger, right? So you have to depress that trigger to deactivate that safety, so you can actually put rounds down it. You're not going to fire that weapon without pulling the trigger. It's just not the case with a revolver. It's just not the case with a revolver. So I think he's thinking modern technology and old technology should be equal, and it's not. So that's my 2 cents. That's why I think he's still going to end up being prosecuted for something, negligence at the least, because somebody should have checked it. When they handed it to him, they should have checked it, and he should have checked it when he picked up that firearm. And this firearm, you could see if there were rounds in here very, very easily. You could pop this cylinder out, you know, look at it, see that there's no rounds in it. He says he thought the gun was not loaded. This one, all you have to do is pull that, take that back to one deal, and you could go through the entire cylinder to see that there's nothing in it. So again, they didn't follow safety protocol, and unfortunately, somebody died. But ignorance of a firearm is not an excuse for shooting someone and claiming ignorance of how it works. Then you shouldn't have been using it or handling it to begin with. And maybe these actors need to go through firearms classes before they're even allowed to go onto a movie set and touch a weapon. Maybe that's what needs to happen. And before they go telling us what we can and can't do with our weapons, maybe they need to exercise some responsibility for their actions. That's just my 2 cents. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment down below. I do read every single comment, whether it's good or bad. I got some haters out there, and that's okay. You know, you hating on me isn't going to change my life. But if you haven't already, guys, hit that subscribe button. Share this video if you like it. Give me a thumbs up. Watch some of my other videos. Give me some thumbs up if you can. Helps me out a lot. I really appreciate it, and I'll keep doing these videos for as long as I can. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great night. We'll see you. Bye-bye.